Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast. The sun is shining outside. We're starting to see the league table take its final form. It feels like we're on a run-in, doesn't it? Now, the relegation places might have almost been all but confirmed. The title might be an absolute procession now for Liverpool. But for the rest of the Premier League, it's basically chuck the teams up in the air and see where they land, isn't it? It's such a random set of results that are happening that could really dictate the way the table looks. And that's really exciting, I think, for all the teams that are involved and for neutrals standing by. So which game do we start with, Myles? I don't know where to focus our attention every week. So what game should we start with?
Maybe not the most exciting game itself, but in terms of permutations for the league, it has to be Forest City, doesn't it?
Dave, how about you? What game are you hoping to focus on?
Took particular fascination this afternoon to watching Bournemouth. Just such a great team to watch, and we obviously will speak a little bit more about them. But they very rarely play a game that's a drab and affair to watch, is it?
That's true.
Really.
Spurs 2, Bournemouth 2. Yeah, come back draw there for Spurs. So we'll definitely focus on that. But yeah, let's start at Forest 1, City 0. Absolutely not related to the fact that we're Manchester United fans at all. Trying to find any nugget of positivity out in this season.
But Forest, I'm definitely not a Man United fan.
No. Well, you can see who
it
is,
right?
Known. I think we know where your allegiances lie, and we'll definitely have a Villa moment as well, Myles. But let's start with Forest, shall we? That grip on the Champions League places is looking tighter. Obviously, the gap between them and City looking wider. Chelsea creeping back in the top four, though, so there's still a bit of tension there for them. But it looks... I mean, this result does wonders, doesn't it? And we look at how this season compares to previous seasons, especially even the last season. And you look at this result in isolation and go, Forest beat City 1-0 at the City ground. It's mad, isn't it? But this season, it's not a surprise, and this was a really hard-fought win for Forest, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But they will take the fact that they've come off the back of this difficult run of fixtures, and they needed to build momentum back up, ready for the rest of the season. And they managed to go and get a point against Arsenal and 3 against City. That's huge for them. I think the fact that they lacked a bit of something in a few of their games recently, or they had some pretty poor results with that weird 7-0 in the middle of it. I think people started to feel like Forest were kind of reverting to where you kind of expect them to be in the league. So to make a kind of statement with the win like this and assert yourselves as not only like leading the Champions League race now, but actually drawing Arsenal closer as well. They're now only 4 points off second. That's huge for them. I mean, they've got 4 points away from second, 3 points above fourth. So we're talking about, are they going to sustain this place in the top four? Well, they're just as likely to catch up on the league title chasers, supposedly.
I mean, how mad would that be? Nottingham Forest in second. Yeah, the title seems like a procession now. But yeah, definitely history is beckoning for Forest in this season. And it wasn't a pretty game, really, was it, Dave? And up until Callum Hudson-Odoi's trademark style winner, it felt like it was going to be a really maybe hard-fought draw more than a hard-fought win. But to a man, I think every Forest player was really impressive. I think they all put a shift in. Ola Aina, I thought, was superb. Who stood out for you, Dave?
I agree. I think Aina had a particularly brilliant game. I thought Dominguez particularly supported him on that side really well up against Doku. I think Doku rarely got a look in down that side, and credit to the both of them. I think they worked really well together. And then Murillo, I thought he was probably their best player. It was difficult to see where the breakthrough was going to come from, wasn't it? Because it was a little bit of it looked like the game was just slowly cruising and going through the motions. I thought Haaland was very quiet in the game. I thought Milenkovic and Murillo did a really good job on him, and Man City just looked out of ideas. And we've seen at times this season in Forest, with particularly their attacking options that they have, they're able to take the game away from you in a split second. And it was a good strike from Hudson-Odoi. I don't know whether the goalkeeper probably should be doing a little bit better there at his near post, but they've got the players there to create these sort of goals and these moments. And it's great to see Forest obviously pulling results out of the bag, because only a few weeks ago we said this was a massive few weeks for them. You look at what they've done. If you're looking at the Arsenal and the Man City game, if you've offered them 4 points out of those two games, they'd snap your hand off.
100%, yeah. I think Forest season continues to be a positive one, and any kind of blip they've had so far has been 1 or 2 games at the most. So what's their running looking like, Myles? Can you see them consolidating that in the next few games? Because I think that's the thing with this Premier League, isn't it? Points have been taken off everybody left, right and centre. So if they can find some consistency in the next handful of games, maybe they can start to think maybe this could happen.
Yeah, we looked at the run of fixtures Forest had and looked at all the challenges, and now it feels like there's a couple more favourable games on the horizon. Obviously, they've got the FA Cup quarter-final to contend with in a couple of weeks, but they've got Ipswich next, away from home, and Ipswich have done nothing at home this season, so you think that that's a really good opportunity for them to, again, get some distance between them and the chasing pack. Then they've got Man United at home. Sorry, boys, but that's 3 points. And then they travel across the Midlands to come and see us. And with Villa's home record, that'd be a really interesting game. Both teams chasing European football down. So I think getting through those last 2 games was a really big thing, because after the Newcastle result, they'll have been really frustrated. But to maintain their place in the FA Cup and really go on a really good cup run, plus then get results against Arsenal and Man City, that is huge. And I wonder if actually there's been a lot of talk about Alaina's future and whether Man City might look at him in the summer. But I mean, Dave mentioned Edison's mistake for the goal. Should they be looking at Matt Sells as well? Because Forest feel like they've got a squad full of players right now that are destined for Champions League football with them in one way or another. The way they're performing this season, they deserve that level, and I think you will get consistency out of them. I mean, Hudson-Odoi's return was huge as well. I heard Lineker refer to him as Robin Hudson-Odoi on Match of the Day, which probably took a lot away from the performance for me, but ultimately he was so threatening still, and Man City just didn't really know how to deal with quite an obvious threat. And Forest's organisation meant that they weren't able to create any threats of their own. I mean, leaving Marmoush on the bench until the 70th minute, when you could see, like you say, that Alaina had Doku's number and that they've got such a potent threat that they've spent a lot of money to bring in January. It's not like they're waiting for European fixtures or the FA Cup themselves. So why are they now not utilising those additions in a game that was there for the taking for a long time? Whereas Forest rode out any kind of minor threat that they faced and created their own chances that seemed far more clinical, didn't they?
Well, yeah, you're right there at the back with Sells. I think that's his 12th clean sheet of the season, which is incredible. And yeah, he's on track to probably be goalkeeper of the season. I think there's a few players in that Forest team that could rightly claim to be in the Premier League team of the season as things stands. Absolute great performances, great going forward as well, and it feels like they are a team that are worth watching. A bit like Bournemouth, Dave, who you earlier sort of credited as being one of the most attacking sides in the Premier League. Now, they drew 2-2 with Spurs and were 2-0 up as well. So they kind of threw this result away. But up until that point, they were by far the better team. Spurs, once again, really slow starters. And Bournemouth took full advantage of that. And it could have been worse, couldn't it? But for a disallowed goal that was really well crafted too. It's a bit unfortunate that was disallowed, because that just kind of encapsulated what Bournemouth do at their best.
Oh, definitely. And I think you say they'd be ruining them throwing away the game. Spurs had a massive element of luck on their side. I mean, you look at the first goal that they scored from. I'm sorry, but there's no way in any game anybody's going to claim that goal. If obviously it wasn't intentional, and obviously the penalty, Kepa's, that he's the one, if any of them, he's thrown it away. It's just ridiculous. The decision that he goes down there to bring down Son, he's nowhere near, he's not going anywhere near the goal. He's completely out of danger. So, but the rest of I think their game in particular, the first half, Spurs just couldn't deal with them. I mean, it's something we've seen from this Bournemouth side all year, and their level of intensity and pressure they put the opposition back line under. They just leave no spaces for them to play out, and we've seen it so many times, haven't we, with Tottenham? They got away with it 2 or 3 times in that first half, and I think Areola would have been very disappointed to not score a couple in that first, because they had a couple of great chances. Clive having one, Evan Nielsen, both saved by Vicario. I thought Vicario had a good game for Spurs as well. But I think the thing is with this particular team is how Areola's got this unit, and let's not forget how well Bournemouth have actually recruited particularly over the last 24 months. I think some of the additions of Brighton, the likes of Cliver, who you would say was much of a bit part player when he was at Roma, obviously had a couple of loan moves away and was out of favour really wherever he went. And he's come in, all of a sudden he's lit this league up this season. I think he's been one of the standout players, one of the standout talents. And I think to take players like that under your wing and really get them to perform, it's a lot really for him to have really endured. And I think especially when you remember their main goal scorer and then their player of the season, probably Aston and Dominic Solanke. going out the door. I just think that the way they play their game, the amount of chances they create, they're just relentless on and off the ball. And I think they're probably the best team to watch in the league for me.
Bold statement, that. I mean, yeah, they've got some entertaining players, haven't they? Kluivert is up there as having the season of his life, but there's a few players could say the same, I think. And the return of Evan Nilsson, I think, changes their shape, definitely. But what do you think of Bournemouth, Myles? I mean, they're in this season where anyone could finish anywhere in the table, really. And they find themselves, I think, in 8th at the moment and only a handful of points off 4th spot. So again, they've just had a couple of games in a row where they've lost, so they've broken that mini losing streak. It's difficult to know where they could finish. It really depends on so many factors and the teams around them and who can find the most form out of this random nature of results, can't it really? I mean, it's so unpredictable.
Yeah, every week you're playing a team that is basically competing for your spot as well. And that's such an interesting dynamic to have in the league. And Bournemouth, even being in that conversation is such an achievement for them. And actually, like Dave says, the way they entertain for a neutral, they'll have a lot of people on side wanting to see them succeed. The way that they are able to transition the ball up the pitch so quickly and efficiently is so exciting to watch. And a lot of that comes from their width as well. I mean, a player that we haven't mentioned yet, but gets an incredible assist in this and looks like he'll be a real big target for a lot of clubs in the summer is Kirkes. He's just been superb this year. And there's been a few players in that sort of position that have been standout. We talked about Anthony Robinson at Fulham having a really good start to the season, but his consistency and the levels that he's able to produce, both attacking and defensively, I think make him a really exciting prospect for Bournemouth or for the next team he moves on to. It's just a shame that they couldn't hold this result because actually Spurs, we know, are getting a lot of players back and you'd rather have played them 4 weeks ago than now, definitely. But when you're 2-0 up, that's such a commanding position to be in. Not early in the game, really, either. They only had, 25 minutes to see that out. So it's unfortunate. And for Kepa to be responsible for the penalty is a shame because he's had a great time at Bournemouth. Another one, that was a really smart bit of recruitment as well. You let Neto move on and you bring in someone who obviously has some sketchy history in England, but generally speaking, it's a great profile and someone that clearly is capable. I mean, look how well he was doing in Spain before he got to Chelsea. There's a player there. So this Bournemouth side are trying to utilise the talent they've got. Results like this, I want to say you can't afford them, but everyone seems to be capable of them at the moment. That whole chasing pack, there's no consistency amongst any of them. So Bournemouth will be disappointed not to win, but a point will do away from home, and they're still in the conversation, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, let's switch the spotlight on Spurs quickly as well before we move on. And yeah, we presumed that Ange would be gone by now, didn't we, based on league performance? But it turns out that's not the case, and I think they are in that weird, strange twilight zone in the Premier League where they're not competing for anything now, and I think they're level on points with United as we speak. So they have kind of got the season now to almost, I don't know, figure out what they can do, get the best players back to full fitness. I think there was a bit of rustiness there, Dave, wasn't there, from Spurs, based on what you saw today, and a few players coming back and not quite looking up to speed. And I think that was how they kind of fell behind, really. They weren't quite as, I guess, fit, as ready and match ready as Bournemouth were, who, you know, are one of the best teams at attacking space, attacking possession, attacking defences and pressing the lines, really. And Spurs weren't quite there. So what does the season look like for Spurs now, do you think, now they have got players coming back? What do they see as a successful Premier League season?
It's difficult to say, isn't it? I think they're in a similar position to Man United. I think they'll be looking to build momentum for the rest of the season now and just get some positive results, because if you look at where they are in the league, it's difficult to see them, you know, getting close to European football. I think that's out of the question, if we're being honest, and you look at the form in the rest of the teams in the league. But yeah, there's some obviously positives to gain from that. Obviously, Udogie and Van der Ven coming back on today. I think that they're obviously positives for them to take from it. I think James Maddison was quite positive when he came on. Again, we said it about Maddison there, haven't we, over the last couple of years? You see him have a good game, you see him have a good couple of moments, and it's just the consistency I think they're looking for from a number of their players. I think that's the main thing for me. Is I think if you look at that lineup that started today, is it a case of, and it's the same with I think the same with Man United. I look at the lineup and I think, you know, for a club like Spurs, are the players that are on that pitch good enough to be playing for Tottenham? not in the first 11.
That's true, but then what's interesting today, the first time in ages, and the fact that they came back into a game, I think this is really telling. If you look at their bench today, Spurs, they had Kinski, who they obviously recently brought in, Van der Ven and Doggy, you mentioned them coming back to fitness, that's huge. Maddison, who you know can turn a game. Bergvall, Archie Gray, Scarlett, young players that they want to invest in and have done a good job for him over the season. And then Mateus Tell and Son as attacking options. Tell didn't even get off the bench. So
No.
that 11 being what it is, the fact that they're now building a squad that has those capabilities to bring players like that off the bench, well, yeah, they got themselves back into the game because their key assets are finally finding a bit of fitness. That'll be really encouraging for them. I've not said a lot of encouraging things about Spurs this season, if we're honest.
No.
I'll eat my words a little bit. That's an impressive thing to be able to do if they can keep them all fit again. But Ange's intensity feels like it's playing a game of tug of war with their hamstrings at the moment. So we'll see how long it lasts.
Yeah, nicely put, actually. Yeah, and also Europa League for them seems like something they will want to go for with players come back to fitness. They've got more of a chance of winning the Europa League than Manchester United have, let's face it. So.
You say that, but they keep saying everything's on these cup competitions, everything's on this cup, and then they lose to Alkmaar in the first leg.
That's true,
They're not out of that tie. 1-0 was a really salvageable result.
Yeah.
But if you're going to put your hat on and go, right, this is everything for us, and I always win a trophy in my second season, you can't be losing to Alkmaar, surely.
I wouldn't be looking at that game against Bournemouth today and thinking that I'm encouraged by that at all, by that performance. I'm thinking I wouldn't be confident of them going there and beating Alkmaar, to be honest.
So we're saying Spurs season is a write-off. You heard it here first. That's it. Spurs are done.
I've been saying that for months.
Yeah, you have. Yeah, I think you see players coming back, and I think Ange needs to start showing that his system with his players does work, and I think that's what Spurs fans will be looking for now. Just evidence that they are on the right track under Postecoglou, because I mean that's still very much in question, isn't it? We'll delve right into Villa, I think, Myles, and it's been a game where they followed up from European football, Champions League football, a great night against Bruges as well, with a great victory there, and didn't struggle. It looks like a really hard-fought win away at Brentford, which is always a difficult place to go. With no Martinez, no Asensio, what happened? They won and could have won by more. It was a really, really great all-round performance.
Nothing feels better than a clean sheet away from home for Villa right now, and then to do that with Robin Olsen in goal as well. That is a miracle. I mean, it's funny with Brentford, isn't it? They obviously started the season with that ridiculous run of form at home, and then since then, when they last beat Newcastle, they lost to Forest, lost to Arsenal. They lost to Plymouth in the FA Cup. They drew with Man City, lost to Liverpool, lost to Spurs, drew with Everton, and now lost to Villa. That's their home form recently. So we caught them in a good moment, is what I'll say. I'll give us that kind of caveat. But yeah, to come off the back of a Champions League win, you feel like we've pretty much cemented a place in the quarterfinals of that competition. That's an incredible achievement. Before that, cemented a place in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. So to be able to have the options in the squad to then put out a good team against Brentford, who defensively looks so much better than Villa have looked in a really long time, that's what we needed to see. The impact that Disassi's had as a loan signing already feels huge. He's not playing the position that any of us really anticipated he'd end up playing in, and still having a great impact. And then that's 2 results in a row now as well, where you can say that Tyrone Mings has been fantastic. He was man of the match in the Champions League. I thought he was outstanding. And now we are looking a bit more structured. Plus Pau Torres was back in the squad as well. So yeah, that's really impressive for us and really encouraging. So I just hope that continues, because I said earlier, no team in the league in that middle portion feels consistent. I have to include us in that as well. Yeah. So I don't want to get carried away with this result. Our away form lately has been terrible, but that's what you need to do to address it, right? So I'll take it. First league double for Villa over Brentford since 1947, I've just read, which is insane. That's wild. Yeah, it is. I feel like we always beat Brentford, because Watkins loves a goal against Brentford. But then lose the other game by the looks of it as well. So yeah, it's Villa finding their feet, isn't it? In a season where they're firing on all fronts, Dave, and I know Myles is a little bit euphoric, I think, seeing these cup competitions actually come into life as well for them and getting to the latter stages. And like you say, deep in the Champions League seems surreal still. And I know Villa are hitting those highs now and trying to find themselves as an elite club. The league table doesn't lie usually, and it shows how inconsistent Villa have been. So I guess
it's difficult to know where they could finish. And I think just trying to be strong in all competitions they're in is the best they can hope for in some ways. And I think you said that on the pod recently, didn't you, Myles? You just want to see a really strong finish, and whatever happens, happens. But you touched on it, Myles, Axel Disassi's performance. Dave, what did you make of Disassi? I've had doubts about him. He's not really shown his best for Chelsea, I don't think. So to see him have a game like this, and again, on the back of Tyrone Mings having such a good, steady performance in the Champions League, their defence looks much better, doesn't it? But Disassi, this was what he needed, wasn't it, to kind of establish himself in that Villa backline?
Definitely. I think I obviously said to Myles before coming out, I thought there weren't many talking points, I don't think, for this particular game. But there were two players for me in particular who I thought were outstanding, maybe three at a push. I think Disassi, Tielemans and Luca Digne, I think, did their jobs perfectly. Disassi nullified that threat of Kevin Chardy on the left, who was virtually anonymous. And then Brian and Bournemouth, I've seen so little games this season where he's just been, pretty much absent on the pitch, and he barely knew he was playing at times. And I thought Tielemans in this game, particularly because we've seen how effective Brentford can be from pressing for the front. They've got so many players with such physicality and make it really difficult for you to play out from the back at times. I thought Tielemans was that perfect link in between defence and attack. And obviously it was a game with a few moments of real quality, but obviously particularly the goal that was disallowed, it's such a shame really, and that's happened a couple of times this season. The Bournemouth goal, which would have been one of the goals of the season this year as well, that Kluivert scored. That's the one thing, VAR just takes out some momentum of the game at the times, because he really felt like the game was growing at that time when all of a sudden Villa had the wind in their sails. It took probably a couple of minutes for them to rule that goal out, and then all of a sudden it just went a little bit flat again. Villa were comfortable, to be honest. They didn't create a great deal. Obviously, there was a couple of nervy moments in the last couple of minutes. It wasn't really until like the last 5 minutes of the game where Brentford started to put the pressure on. But obviously, you look at the areas that they won the game in. That a bit of quality from Watkins, and obviously Disassi, I thought, was outstanding and really just made that right hand side his own, going forward as well as obviously defending. I thought he just looked so at ease taking the ball out of defence and obviously carrying it forward.
Can I just say, Dave said that Villa looked comfortable, and I think that's actually where you start to see Unai Emery really have an effect on this team when it comes to managing the latter stages of Europe, because there's been a lot made of how Villa have struggled to come back from European results and replicate them in the league. I think that stat is a bit of an enigma to unpick, really, because some of the fixtures we've had coming off the back of the European fixtures have been really difficult. The injuries have been difficult as well. But in this game, what it felt like was he just wanted to take the pace out of the game a little bit. Because you know what Villa can be like. Sometimes they can be quite full throttle, and that leaves them quite vulnerable at the back. But in this game, we conceded the possession to Brentford a bit more. We soaked things up. We slowed things down. We didn't give them the chance to let Mbeumo bomb on beyond Luca Digne, because actually we sat a bit deeper in moments. And it was like Emery wanted to take the intensity out, because look at the fixtures we've had over the last few weeks. It's ridiculous, the run of games we've had in such a short space of time. And I think that's why you didn't see much of like Rashford or Marlon in this game, because actually we knew we weren't looking for quick, run at them. You rely on Morgan Rogers to get you up the pitch when you need it, but ultimately what they wanted to do was just control the pace of it. Let McGinn and Tielemans just sit on the ball when they needed to, dictate a bit of play. Yeah, we're comfortable with having ball playing defenders. Like Mings is excellent on the ball, really. Disassi did really well. And you can see that actually that's how we'll be more successful as the season goes on. Just knowing where our limitations are a little bit and not being so full throttle when we need to be.
Yeah, it's a season ahead that promises much for Villa fans, I think, and that's good. And still being seventh in the league, despite only winning 2 of the last 6 in the Premier League, is a statement, really. Still competing, but there's a couple of teams breathing down your necks, I think, and looking over your shoulder. You've also got Newcastle with a couple of games still to play, Bournemouth, as we've mentioned, and Fulham as well, who lost to Brighton, which is fortunate for Villa. We'll move on to that game next. Brighton 2, Fulham 1. Brighton actually went behind in this game. A Raul Jimenez goal, really well taken, put Fulham ahead. And it's another one of those games where two very similar teams at their best, you don't know who's going to win, but Brighton pulled it back to win their 4th Premier League game in a row. Now we have to consider Brighton, don't we, Dave, as European football contenders potentially, based on the form they're in right now and the fact that they've got players like João Pedro winning a penalty deep into injury time and then scoring it under pressure too, to continue their momentum. They do look very good, don't they, Brighton?
Absolutely. I mean, we've mentioned, haven't we, over the last few weeks, you don't realise the squad that actually Brighton have built over, the last 12 to 18 months. Obviously, just casually just adding, making these little additions and these little tweaks here and there. All of a sudden, they look like a real outfit, and they're only 3 points off of the Champions League place. That's completely under the radar, isn't it? How that's actually came about, and I think that a lot of their fans will feel a little bit, probably not disrespected, but almost probably feel a little bit as though they're not getting the credit that maybe they deserve at times. We did mention, and there's been a number of games this year where I think it's thrown us off their probably giving them the credit that they deserve. Obviously, you look at the Forest game, it was a massive loss for them. That threw them off. Obviously, they came back and recovered. Went on a good run after that, and all of a sudden they put themselves in a great position. And I think if you think about some of the players that they've lost over the year as well, we've spoken about it. How they keep finding these talents is unbelievable. But it's great to see actually them making some of these rotations, I think, each week. Obviously, they've still got Danny Welbeck in there who will come in and do a job. But João Pedro, it's good to see him get on the score sheet this time around because he's gone on a little bit of an indifferent run of late. But then you've got the players like Minte, who's a great find for them, I think. It's just it makes such a... I think he really definitely resonates well with that Brighton style. He's just got that intensity about his game. He works hard off the ball, works really hard running forward. And Matoma, again, if you look at that front line, actually, it's got the potential to be a really, really good forward line in the future. And that's just the thing that Brighton have struggled with in the past, isn't it? Just keeping hold of their players and just having some sort of stability in the team. Give Hurtsler a lot of credit on what he's done this season, his debut season. I think he's done a phenomenal job.
I still think they've got room to grow and improve, though. I think Brighton seems still a little bit vulnerable to the counter, look a bit vulnerable at the back generally. I think they've shipped 40 goals so far this season, and they're kind of up there with Villa, I think, with defensive inconsistencies, letting them down. They've only got a goal difference of, I think, +6, which again might be an edge over Villa in the race because they're still looking at a minus goal difference, aren't they? So you never know, that might be important. But Brighton, Myles, I think are just very good going forward, and I think they're such a threat. And to get into a position to even win a penalty like they did, and I mean, that was reckless to challenge João Pedro like that so late on. But they were still pressing and still pushing for that winner so deep. And I think that's where Hurtsler gets the best out of them, isn't it? They've got such a great arsenal of forward players.
They definitely do. And the intensity that they all bring. One thing that Brighton's forwards all want to do is run at a defender, particularly when they're playing Pedro. You can see that they're really comfortable with the ball at their feet. Dribbling's one of their main attributes, and a bit of pace. So that, as a defender, is a nightmare to face because they can attack you from 3 different spaces with just sheer momentum, it feels like. And Pedro does really well to win the penalty. He anticipates the contact, he does really well for it. I think for Brighton now, we've said all season, they've got this weird inconsistency. I mean, only Everton have drawn more games in the league than them this season, and Arsenal have matched them, which I think tells you everything. When you're racing for something in particular, you want that consistency to be able to get something over the line, and they just have lacked that at times. So to get 4 wins on the bounce is massive. The real test comes now, because their next fixtures, they've got Man City away, and if they win that, that's a huge statement for them, regardless of what Man City's form has been like this season. In terms of that race, that really puts them in the driving seat. Then they've got Villa at home and then Palace away, and the Palace game's always big anyway, but Palace are one of the most informed teams in the league. They're 3 very difficult fixtures with an FA Cup quarter-final in the middle. So if Brighton really want to be pushing for Europe and want to feel like they deserve a spot in that top 5 or the top 8, if that's what it comes down to, this is where they prove it, isn't it? And where those attacking players will need to threaten quite vulnerable defences at times.
Yeah, well, loads to play for, I think, in the majority of the Premier League. But Liverpool seem to be pretty much on the home run now, don't they, for the title? They beat Southampton 3-1. 2 penalties for Mo Salah, making him, interestingly, the highest scoring FPL player in FPL history. And there's still a number of games still to play. So it just kind of shows you what kind of season he's having. But
was my captain this week as well, thankfully. But
everybody's captain, I think.
If he's not your captain, then you haven't been playing for a very long time.
Dave, we're looking at you. But the title looks like it's decided because Arsenal drew at Old Trafford, 1-1 to Manchester United. We'll breeze through the best of the rest, starting with those, Dave. And 15 points behind Arsenal, behind Liverpool now with a game still to play over them. But it feels elementary, doesn't it? And I think this game, starting with Arsenal, shall we, didn't demonstrate any strength, I think, on their part to kind of attack this title race from here on in. They were controlled fairly comfortably, I think, by United for the most part, and still clearly lacking that attacking threat that we keep talking about. Mourinho isn't it, is he?
Not in this game, certainly. I think we dealt with Arsenal quite comfortably, particularly for probably 3/4 of the game. There was a couple of moments, I think, particularly when we maybe got a little bit tired. But I just think they just lack that little bit of unpredictability and that little bit of quality in the final third. And you saw actually when Martinelli came on towards the end of the game, it got a little bit better and obviously created a couple of half chances from that. But it's just not enough, especially when you're looking to compete for a league title, the very highest honours in the game, and them not recruiting in January, not bringing anybody in, it's going to come back to bite them because a game like today, which they should be looking to win, particularly this Man United side, at the moment, they should be really winning at a canter, and if anything, United look like the more likely team to score.
Yeah, they did.
They had the better chances in the game.
I feel like we should make a compilation of the amount of times we've had to say that Arsenal need to sign a forward. It feels like it's been every other pod this season. I mean, Myles, you are in a family of Arsenal supporters, and I think you watched the game with them, didn't you, this afternoon? What was the flavour from them about Arsenal's performance and Arsenal's season now? I mean, is there a resignation there from what you can see?
Not to offend you boys, but the main thing I heard a lot was, this Man United side, how are we not beating this Man United side? That was the main thing I heard.
I mean, that just sounds like sour grapes, but,
I mean, I think it's fair.
It is.
The thing is, there's constantly a conversation around the issue of not having a forward. But if we're totally honest, it doesn't make a difference because they're not creating anything, really. I don't think you can hold this result on Marino's head. I mean, he's played 90 minutes, which is interesting. When Martinelli comes off the bench for Nwaneri, that's a big change to be making when you're not really creating anyway. It feels like that's the wrong player to be taken off. Marino can only do something if you give him the ball in those spaces. You saw it against Leicester. He was effective because Nwaneri was able to pick out a ball into the box that he could do something with. But Arsenal seem reluctant to do that. And it feels like the only way things are going to happen is if someone like Declan Rice picks some momentum up and drives forward. I've seen that a lot from him lately. It's like he can see that Arsenal aren't doing what they need to be doing. So he just goes, all right, fine, sack the system. I'm just going to go and try and get something done. And he managed to get that moment, which is a big thing for Arsenal, because if they'd lost this game, I think it would have felt embarrassing, to be honest. But ultimately, I think the problem lies beyond where the number 9 is and lies more in the over-reliance on Bukayo Saka to create your chances and score your goals, and the massive decline in the form of Martin Odegaard. Because we're talking about arguably the player of the season in the Premier League last year, bar 2, Rodri and Foden. He was outstanding, and this season, I've said a couple of times on here, has looked a shadow of that, and now he doesn't have Saka to connect with and doesn't really trust that there's a number 9 in front of him that's going to do anything. He just looks hesitant all the time. I mean, there was a moment he got on the ball outside the box, he ended up basically by the corner flag, and I think it was Collier just took the ball off him and just run up the pitch, and you think that wouldn't have happened last season. The confidence would have been there to go, do you know what, I'm almost a false 9 here. We don't have the obvious goal scoring option up front, so I've got to go and do it. And he's not doing that anymore. So Arsenal will be really frustrated. I mean, they're going to be looking over their shoulder at Forest more than they're looking ahead at Liverpool now. And I think they're pretty comfortable. But all of a sudden, a couple more results like this, they aren't that far away from the conversation. Chelsea are 6 points behind them. It's not. I'm confident Arsenal are going to get top 4. I'm confident they will. They will probably finish second because they'll start to get players back and it will make a difference. But we've seen weirder things this season, and they could get drawn into that conversation.
Does it highlight the reliance on set pieces? Because they've not scored a set piece in, was it the last 6 or 7 games, apparently?
Yeah.
They've been poor at them.
yeah, all of a sudden Villa and Palace have overtaken them for the teams that score the most in the league, and that was the thing. That was Arsenal's weapon for so long. Now you just don't know where the goal is coming from. It's so odd that we're talking about a team that managed to score 7 in the Champions League this week.
Yeah. If we're being honest, the first fixture against United, both their goals were set pieces. They struggled to break us down. It was just that they got bailed out with the corners and the free kicks.
Yeah. Well, from here on in, let's switch to United, Dave, quickly, because the only chance we'll get to talk about them really is how we use the rest of this season to consolidate some kind of system and bed young players in, I think, is the main thing for fans to see, because we've got so many players that are counting the days till they exit Old Trafford now. We're counting the days too. And we want to see that youthful energy, don't we? And we did, I think, in this game. And we've seen it with Obi, we've seen it with Collier. But I feel like this was the chance for Aidan Heaven to kind of have a bit of a say. Now, we got booed when he came on at half-time by the Arsenal supporters, which I think was a bit weird for a young player. You know, he's going where he thinks he's going to get opportunity. And I thought he acquitted himself pretty well. He felt like a shining light, as well as seeing Obi becoming a goal-scoring threat and hopefully getting a goal as well. And maybe Collier kind of establish himself in the midfield at some point during the rest of the season. How are you feeling about those young players?
Yeah, obviously you're always optimistic. I think when you're obviously getting young talent from, you know, some of the bigger clubs around you, and they're touted as, you know, big talents. And I think him coming into this environment at United, I think it's always a bit of a balancing act, I think, with talent and young players, give them that opportunity, because you don't want to overexpose them. I think certain environments, this is not an ideal moment for United in particular. So I think Amrim's been quite sensible, to be honest, with what he's given to the players. I think his hands have been tied. He's had to probably put more of them on the bench than he would have liked, particularly with some of the injuries we've got at the minute. But I thought Heaven had, even in the game against Fulham, obviously, where he played obviously all of extra time as well, looked comfortable. And I think that shows you the kind of composure I think he's got as a defender. He looks very relaxed in himself, and I think the mentality and his character. So it's a good sign. But again, it's not the ideal situation to be playing these players in. But it gives them a taste for, obviously, you know, future football. And I think showing that we believe in their development path as well. That's probably why some of these players look at players like Man United. They look at players like, you know, Alejandro Garnacho coming on, and obviously, you know, the path that he's had since he's come in. We give players a chance, and you can't really fault certain players looking elsewhere, thinking, okay, I'm getting a chance here, I'm going to go elsewhere. And all of a sudden nowadays, it's actually really difficult for clubs to keep a hold of their top talent, because they know they can get, if they're good enough, they're going to get games, and if they believe in themselves, then why not?
And also, I think
FFP ruins it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes them an asset, really, which is sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, looking at the other matches, Wolves won, Everton won. I think that makes both teams fairly safe now. I think even Wolves in 17th are 6 points ahead of Ipswich in the relegation zone. So a really comfortable result for both teams. Crystal Palace won, Ipswich 0. Ismail Assar with a late winner there for Palace, who are on an amazing run of form. Let's talk about Palace quickly, shall we, Myles? They're looking great as well, aren't they? And it's going under the radar how good a form they're in lately.
Yeah, I feel like they might sneak into this weird European battle at some point as well, because they are the team with the most momentum. And actually, when you look at their squad, there's a lot of players there that are quite exciting. I mean, Ismail Assar is hitting a bit of form now. Obviously got a couple against Villa, and then has scored again this week. That's a great asset to have, particularly if you're now waiting to see when Mateta's going to be back. You've got other goal threats on the pitch. They've brought in Chilwell in January to give Mitchell a bit of rotation where they need to. The back three looks really settled, despite the fact they lost Chalobah in January. Like, Chris Richards is an excellent player. He's doing really, really well there. And Dean Henderson, this is the keeper that Man United thought they had for a while, isn't it? He's showing what we always kind of thought he would be capable of. I think he's been fantastic for Palace lately, and it will definitely be one that Thomas Tuchel's watching. Obviously, Pickford's still Jordan Pickford and has had a good season with Everton as well. I'm not necessarily expecting him to be displaced right now, but it won't be long before Henderson's England's number one, you'd imagine, because he's probably surpassed a lot of the ones that were competing for him. Like, if you look at Ramsdale, obviously, he's doing as well as he possibly can at a club like Southampton, but the levels are different now, and Henderson looks like the sort of player beyond Nick Pope, definitely. That's who England will be looking at soon, I think. And there's a few players in that Palace team that definitely will be integral parts of the squad. Eze will be around it. Wharton is a fantastic player. this is a good team, this Palace team, and actually the form at the start of the season maybe deceived us a little bit, and we're now seeing what we saw when Glasner first came in. And that's a really encouraging sign.
Yeah, Premier League is definitely all to play for, I think, in that middle section, isn't it? We say this every game week, and I feel like that will be the case till the end of the season, won't it? But tell you what would be interesting, it would be, like you say, the England international break and seeing who Thomas Tuchel picks, because there are quite a few English players who could kind of earn themselves a bit of recognition. So that would be interesting to see. But before then, we'll wrap up with just a quick look at the Champions League games. Obviously, a lot to play for in the coming week, and I think in Europe it's going to be particularly exciting for you, Myles. How are you feeling about that?
It's such a weird one because you are looking at the most exciting thing ever, a quarter-final in the Champions League. If we can just get a home result against a team that we will be favourites against, we've gone away and got an excellent result. Brilliant. And then inevitably we end up facing Liverpool in the quarterfinals. It's so gross. Like, if we're going to go out, that's the last people I want it to be to. That'll be a really difficult tie. But
it's not over there, mate. I think PSG, they had a good game. They should have finished Liverpool off, I thought. They were all over the place, Liverpool, for the majority. They were very lucky with the smash and grab win. So yeah, let's not count your chickens there. It might not be Liverpool.
Paris in the Champions League, though, we know what they like to do. They like to bottle it at last minute.
I don't know. This is a different Paris.
They look so good, and yeah, it is a really different side. And I don't know that they probably beat us in the quarterfinals as well. But I'd rather that. At least it's exciting. A little trip to Paris instead.
What do you think you'd get on that journey? Would you? Could you get tickets for that, I wonder?
We'll see. Sneak performer told in with me as well. We could both go.
Villa Park will be rocking, no doubt, though. Dave, how are you feeling about the week ahead?
Cautiously optimistic. Obviously,
Sociedad wasn't as bad, was it?
We should have really carried a lead into this second leg. I think probably a little bit unfortunate with that penalty, to be honest. But we're all fed up of handballs, aren't we? And what isn't the penalty these days, especially in European games. But yeah, I think it'd be nice just to see it. I don't know what it is. I think I must be deluded because I always go into a United game being optimistic and hoping that somehow we're going to play a good game of football, and then I'm constantly disappointed every single week.
It's the definition of being a football fan, isn't it, really?
Yeah, Dave's been weaned on success at United, but yeah, that's been tested this season. Let's put it that way. But that's all we've got time for on the pod this week. Please do join us next week as we maybe touch on the Champions League, depending on how good or how bad it might be, and also the Premier League's next round of action too. But until that time, guys, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Speak soon. See you later.
See you.
See ya.